I think it's time to say that finally, in year 4, Bret Bielema got his program-defining win. Let's talk about it. Locked On Illini. Let's go.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Illini. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Simple reminder, you can find us on all your favorite audio platforms and on YouTube. Just do a search for Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Sunny Verma. You can find me at IlliniCast or on all social medias. Just do a search for Locked On Illini. You can message me there. That will be me responding. If you have feedback, if you have some questions, or maybe even segment ideas or show ideas. This show is my show, but it is also your show. If you'd like to support the channel, all I ask in return is if you can hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and you can really help me out, at least on the YouTube side. They'll send this out to different Illini fans. Today's episode is going to be one that I've thought over the last couple of days as we kind of slowly get off the high of that victory over the Michigan Wolverines. And that's me thinking that maybe this was the program-defining win that we've been waiting for under Bret Bielema. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, what does program-defining win even mean? That's a definition that the one that you might have in your head might be different than the one I have in my head. Maybe I'm going to ramble on for the next 5-6 minutes, and you'll kind of understand where I'm coming from. Yes, I understand Michigan isn't the Michigan of yesteryear, or even a couple years after that. They are back-to-back Big Ten champions, but they're clearly not at the level that they were last year or the previous couple of years. But that's not the point. The victory on Saturday, for me, what I was impressed about is not only were you 5-point dogs at one point to Michigan, but once the kickoff happened, you beat Michigan by being Michigan. It was you that controlled the lines. Everyone coming into this game thought Michigan would be controlling the offensive line. They'd be controlling the trenches, the defensive line, and that Illinois, in particular, Luke Altmaier, would be forced to make quick throws and hopefully try to beat them over the top because their secondary is so weak. But that's not what happened. Luke Altmaier was 9 for 18 for 80 yards. Now, granted, he lost a couple of those yardage because Michigan defensive backs, just for whatever reason, started grabbing these wide receivers and pass interferences were called. But Illinois at no point, at least to me, and maybe I'm watching it too much through the orange and blue sunglasses, but Illinois is clearly the better team against Michigan. And again, I don't care how far Michigan has fallen. I had about an hour's long conversation with a person who covers a different team just this morning. Why? He wanted to talk to me about Bret Bielema. He wanted to know the team that he covers. I won't disclose right away until he's ready for his episode. His university hired their coach similarly around the same time that Bret Bielema did. And Bret Bielema was on that final list. And things have gone awry for his program. And so he was very curious, just asking me questions about Bret. What is it that's making him as successful as he is at Illinois right now? Nobody predicted 6-1. I'm as optimistic of an Illinois football fan as you're going to find. And I certainly did not predict 6-1. I had 7 wins total. And at this point, if they finished with 7 wins, it would be a disappointment. But in the midst of my conversation with him, I just talked about how when it comes to Bret, the coaches, the players, they all trust him. Bret Bielema says it himself, that his job as a head coach is he coaches up 2 different parts of his team. The players, of course, tries to get them ready for Saturday and in the long term gets them ready to hopefully make it at a professional level. And you know what? He's pretty good at that. Now that Saban has retired, no head coach in the country has put more offensive linemen into the NFL than Bret Bielema. And keep in mind, that's including a couple-year gap where he wasn't coaching. Another thing, it comes to the assistant coaches. Bret Bielema, through his decades of being a college football coach now, has an immense Rolodex where the best coaches in the country all want to work for him. And why? Because they know he's got their interest in heart. Ryan Walters got that Purdue job, and Bret Bielema had a lot to do with it. Guys like Aaron Henry, a former player of Bret Bielema's. Barry Lenny Jr. jumped at the opportunity to come coach under Bret Bielema again after having already coached with him at Arkansas. These are guys who understand that Bret's job is to win football games. But he's at a different part of his career now where he understands this could be his legacy job. Keep in mind the standards aren't that high, but if he's able to win 7 to 9 games over the next decade, over the next 15 years, he could end up being the all-time winningest coach in Illinois football. And the truth is, he doesn't even have to become the all-time winningest head coach. If he wins 7 games for the next 10 years, guess what? The minute he retires, we're all going to try to figure out where to put his statue in front of Memorial Stadium. I think he understands that. And the rest of the football world is starting to understand that. A lot of people, I've heard from multiple people come up to me after Saturday's game and say, you know what, that Illinois team, that reminded me of the Bret Bielema Wisconsin Badgers. Just dominant in the trenches. Just out-physicaled one of the most physical teams in the country. Michigan hasn't scored 7 points since, I believe it was 2014. This wasn't just a good performance. This came on the heels of what was the worst half Illinois football has had all season long, where a lot of people were pushing that panic button. When you give up 49 points to arguably the worst team in the Big Ten, of course panic sets in. We all remember what happened 2 years ago. That team started 7-1. Where did they finish? 8-5? A lot of people thought, hey, Purdue, you're favored to win by whatever it was, 22 points, and to have to go to overtime and, needing a last-second stop to come out with a victory against the worst team in the Big Ten, that's not impressive. And what did I say? I said, you know what? Yeah, maybe not, but it's college football. It's okay. Every team is going to have bad games. The good teams, the very good teams in the country have bad games. Illinois didn't have a bad game. They just had a really bad half. And instead of the season all of a sudden taking a dive, Bret Bielema, Aaron Henry, that coaching staff put together a game plan, which was honestly a masterclass. And they took down the Michigan Wolverines, a game that they've had circled for, let's be honest, 2 years at this point. After Bret's been very clear that he thinks the officials may have taken that victory away from Illinois 2 years ago at the Big House. The team came prepared. The team arguably played their best game of the season. And I say that having the team itself didn't play very well. And that's where I'm kind of circling back on this. Right now, Bret Bielema has us at 6-1, defeating number 24 Michigan Wolverines, and we didn't play our best ball. What happened on Saturday happened in front of national television. It was the main game on CBS. The whole world watched. The whole world watched not only Bret Bielema and Illinois football put on a show, but we saw Josh Whitman. We saw the city of Champaign, Memorial Stadium, put on a show celebrating the 100-year anniversary of the stadium and the Red Grange game. We cemented on Saturday that, hey, Illinois football is here to stay. And the reason for that is Bret Bielema. Michigan may not be the Michigan of yesteryear, but that doesn't mean that Bret Bielema's victory was any less impressive. What that does mean is that impressive victories, even more impressive victories, are on their way. Hey, Illini fans, it's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we've pooled over $20,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to a massive change. With the Roy app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific player you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going, and you can even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. The best part? It's risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't deliver the content, you get your money back. This week, I'm supporting Gabe Yakis. I just pitched in $100, and I'd love for you to join me. Even $10 makes a difference. Let's show Gabe the love and keep him connected to our school. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets your team up for success. Plus, don't miss out on Roy's exciting giveaway. Win 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, and enter referral code LOCKEDON, and you're entered. Already on Roy? Any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Download Roy now and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_. Return on you for more information. Support the players. Change the game. Roy. All right, Tuesday episode. So you know what that means. My good friend Big Ten Ted comes on the show. Ted, thanks for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Great to be here as usual. A big weekend in Champaign this weekend. Excited to talk about Illinois and a lot of other Big Ten action that went down.
You know, before we start talking about Illinois, I feel obligated to give credit where credit's due, and that's to CBS for that presentation that they had from the minute that game started. You know, when they went old-timey, they just did a fantastic presentation overall, and it made me all the more optimistic about, you know, being aligned with them in this next media deal that we're, aligned with them on. They just, when they do something, they do it right.
Yeah, they do a tremendous job. And by the way, they have the Big Ten championship game also this year. So that should be a lot of fun to see how they present that. They've had the SEC title game, of course, for a long time, but they did a fantastic job honoring the history. And, you know, Brad Nessler has been calling these games for a long time. But before he moved to CBS and they had the SEC deal, right? He was the ABC, ESPN. He called a lot of Big Ten games, right? And you know, he's kind of been in this area of the country before he moved to the SEC when they had the CBS contract. So it was great to see everything that they did honoring the history, because the history was so important to this weekend with Red Grange. And the more, you know, in the limited time I had this week, even after I did my Michigan Illinois preview on my network, and then, you know, looking at and then hopping on your segment earlier last week, I kind of dived into it a little bit more, and just how impactful, right, that Red Grange's legacy was, not only on Illinois, but all of college football. And I love that. The thing that I love the most was, and I forget what the line was, but when they finished up the Open, before that, when it went from black and white to color, he had this quote from a rhyming quote from the sports writer at the end that I thought that rhymed, and then you know, something about tackling, and you got to choose to tackle something else, or Red Grange, or whatever it was, and however it was perfectly put together. Give that producer an Emmy Award. I don't even want to know who the other candidates are. That's the Emmy Award winner for best TV Open of the year, no question.
So let's talk about the game itself. Now, you know, I did watch your preview, and you did predict an Illini victory, so good on you, Ted. But did you predict this decisive of a victory for Illinois?
Well, you know, here's the thing. The things that I talked about on my preview didn't happen, right? I thought Michigan could have a pretty successful day running the ball. I thought Illinois could have a pretty successful day throwing the ball. And none of those things really happened. Really, which is why we love the sport. It can be pretty unpredictable sometimes. Big props to Illinois up front, right? You look at that second half game, against Purdue. And you mentioned it here in your first segment. It didn't have a bad game, had one bad half against the Boilermakers. And what they did up front, I was very impressive. Gabe Akis had a fantastic game, both in run defense and rushing the passer, certainly as well. I think Tara Edwards had a good game up front in the interior of that defensive line. I think they stepped up and they looked more like that Illinois defensive front that they did outside of that second half against Purdue. So, I think now that we've encapsulated this, I think maybe that second half is a little bit fluky right now. At least that's the way it appears. That's the way it looks, at least to me. And, and you look at what Illinois was able to do running the football, right, against this Michigan front. I think that especially now with Caden Fagan's injury out for the season, I think that provides some optimism. I think you're going to see a rotation. We saw Luke Altmaier run the football and exercise his mobility once again. And now you've got the McCrays, you got the Lawfreys, you got the Valentines back there that are going to look to run the football. And maybe you won't have a bell cow, but you do have three serviceable backs that can get the job done. But this is an impressive victory. I want to get that out of the way. But I also want to say this Michigan team, they're borderline bad. And I covered that in my Week 8 recap here on Monday. They are not good. Michigan State this week, maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's not looking good in Wolverine country. We all knew that they'd take a step down, but they have taken a drastic step down. I think it's because the parts we thought maybe would be elite on Michigan, the defense and the run game, have not been elite. Look, defense is a really good defense. Run game is really good, but it's not able to compensate for what the pass defense looks like, what the quarterback play looks like, and all of this puts together. And then you look in a new coaching staff. And it certainly hasn't been great for Michigan, but 6-1 right now for Illinois. They're sitting there, got a big game this week that we're going to talk about. So certainly a lot of momentum for the Fighting Bret Bielemas right now.
Yeah, 6 wins. The Vegas over on under was 5.5. And now at this point, everything, is kind of house money. But Illinois isn't the only surprising team in the Big Ten. The one that's garnering the most interest, understandably. Now, I said last week.
You look so disappointed.
Well, but I'm a man of my word. I said last week that if Indiana would handle Nebraska, I would raise my hand and say I was wrong. And that's exactly what I'm doing. For those of you watching on YouTube, for those listening on audio, Indiana turns out is pretty good. Huh?
Yeah, they are. They're something else. They're a machine right now. It's crazy. Like, think about Indiana and what they were under Tom Allen after the 2020 season, right? They won 8 games in 2019. We all know about Michael Penix Jr. In 2020 at IU. Think about what they were. And now this is a legitimate playoff team. And I said it in my recap today. Everyone should be afraid of Indiana, not just in the Big Ten. I'm talking about this team. They are structured, I think, to possibly win a game or maybe a couple of games in the playoff. I think we need to start having that conversation. We need to start talking about it. Now, I know the injury to Curtis Rourke, look, that's going to be something that they're going to have to deal with, but he is going to come back. Kurt Cignetti said in his press availability today, he is going to come back in the regular season. But Taven Jackson is a talented quarterback. People forget. This is a 4-star guy, went to Tennessee. The room was crowded, so he came back to his home state and his home school there at Indiana. Of course, his brother, Trace Jackson Davis, very talented basketball player in there as well. So he kind of came home, and he looked good in the second half. Now, I know Nebraska was getting beaten down, and maybe the motivation and all the packages weren't the same and everything. But still, he's a talented quarterback, and I think you plug him into the system, the way Indiana's running the football and how balanced they are, I think they're going to be fine. And you look at the schedule, I think they're going to be fine over the next couple of games. But it's not just the offense, man. The defense and the defensive line got after it against Nebraska. They got into the face of Dylan Raiola. Nebraska couldn't run the football. Indiana, they went the way they established themselves right away. It's some big Justice Ellison runs on that first drive and being so balanced. Like, there's so many weapons across this formation for this team. The one thing that kind of pops into my head about this, I'm curious to see if roster formation is going to change a little bit. What did we hear this offseason from Kurt Cignetti? Production over potential. I don't want 5 stars that have been riding the bench for a year or two at Georgia. They haven't seen the field. I want Curtis Rourke, who has proven, albeit in a lower level in the MAC, that he has been successful. He's been on the field. He's seen a lot of football. You see so many of these guys, Miles Cross, Miles Price. We know about Elijah Surratt. We know about some guys on the defensive side of the ball, right? They've all seen a lot of football. And I think that experience is really one of the driving forces why Indiana is where they're at. Because a lot of people, how they do this in 6 or 7 games? Well, you're bringing in a lot of people that have seen a lot of time on the football field. These aren't brand new guys. Right, they've just played at a lower level, but they've seen experience. It's not like we're bringing in a bunch of transfers from some high-level schools that really their most experience is playing in high school. So I think that formula is proving to work right now for Curt Cignetti. It's a really good coaching staff. We know that. And, I think they're going to be favored in every game except that Ohio State game. And I think that Buckeye game could be it's in Columbus. It could be a pretty darn competitive contest. This is an Indiana team that if you're not on the wagon, you better reserve a spot, because I think spots are filling up quickly with IU.
Illinois, Indiana, two of the pleasant surprises in the Big Ten. But on the opposite side, is USC really 1-4 in conference?
They are. Check the big10.org. There they are on the official website in the standings, sitting there for USC. Of course, the loss to Maryland. And this thing it's reminding me, and I talked about this today. I'm not saying Lincoln Riley and Scott Frost are the same coach. Lincoln Riley is obviously a much better overall coach, but you're seeing little tendencies of the downfall of Nebraska, where you have close loss after close loss after close loss to teams of different talent levels. Like, you push Penn State, who's the number 3 team in the country. You push Penn State to overtime, but then you lose to Maryland. Now, all props to Mike Locksley. Great job coming back. But when you're up 28-14 with 11 minutes to go, you got to close that game. You got to close that game out. You got to win that football game right now. There are some serious questions at USC. Look, they can't fire him. The buyout is $70 million. Jimbo's was $77 million, right? So it would only be topped by that. They've invested a lot into Lincoln Riley. Like, when he was hired, they gave him a private jet. They bought him 2 houses. The new football facility that they're building that's slated to open in the next few years, Lincoln Riley was involved in the design process. He is very invested. So I don't think that's really on the table right now. But I'm once again very curious to see how these next couple of weeks go. If this thing really starts to take a downturn, and they don't make a bowl game, for example, I think Jen Cohen, the athletic director, is certainly going to step in, and you're going to see some changes. Will she kind of make Lincoln Riley hire an offensive coordinator? Will we see a general manager come in to help with roster management? It's not good. They don't have the elite players like Caleb Williams to bail them out this year. So, USC sitting in a spot, kind of a harsh welcome to the Big Ten so far.
Illinois and Indiana battling for college football playoff spots, and USC and Michigan battling just to make a bowl game. Just another normal year in the Big Ten. All right, Ted, we'll talk about next week's games right after this. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So, when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, Ted, week 9 in the Big Ten. The slate looks pretty heavy. First off, let's just go ahead and start with the beloved. Is there any way Illinois covers the spread against the Oregon Ducks?
Yeah, the top-ranked team in the country right now. It's a big spread. It's north of 20 points right now. It is I think it's sitting at somewhere around 25. It's very similar to what the spread was, I think, for the Purdue game, which maybe that thing will come down as game day certainly gets closer on Saturday. Illinois, they need to have another really good performance on their defensive line. Gabe Akis needs to do well, but once again, this is going to be a challenge. Oregon's offensive line is coming into their own. I think is one of the best in the conference and one of the best in the country. They have one of the best tackle duos Josh Connerly is a fantastic prospect. Dejani Cornelius is great. Certainly on the other side as well. You need to find it. Xavier Scott needs to find a way to take the football away. Dylan Gabriel, okay, he has thrown some interceptions and he has missed some receivers at some points in time. But going to Eugene, this is certainly going to be a tough task, because if this defensive line up front for Illinois, they play well, we know what Oregon can do, getting the ball over the top. They've done a really good job, I think, stretching the field more this year. Evan Stewart is that deep threat. Evan Stewart has stepped in where Troy Franklin really left off last year. And they're just such a good football team. Like, you see Terrence Ferguson, one of the best tight ends in the conference, go out. They can just plug in a weapon and a unicorn like Kenyon Sadiq into this offense as well. And then that Oregon defense, even without Jordan Birch, you plug in a guy like Mateo Uiagalelei coming off the edge, and it's just there's so much depth of talent. I'm sure people on my networks are so sick of hearing me talk about it, but it's true. That's why they're a national championship contender. Guys get hurt, they just plug in more 4-stars. They just plug in guys that can be all Big Ten type of players, right? So yeah, it is going to certainly be a difficult task. This offensive line for Illinois is certainly going to be tested as well. So and then Illinois throwing the football against this Oregon secondary. Oregon, I think, is one of the best secondaries. They've really improved at that spot from where they were last year. Their secondary, they stick to these guys like glue. It's going to be tough, but you got to find a way to maybe muck it up a little bit. You got to find a way to get them to commit some of these mental mistakes, force some turnovers, the usual stuff. We'll see if Bret Bielema can do it. It's certainly going to be a tall task.
Yeah, this is going to be tough. All season long, I've talked about, how Illinois, when it comes to just player for player, talent for talent, we're usually the inferior team, compared to our opponents. But our coaching and just our team cohesiveness can pull it off to, what's amounted to a 6-1 record so far this season. But Oregon is on a different level. Oregon's talent, you're talking about a couple tiers higher. So I can't say that I'm coming into this game with a whole lot of confidence.
Yeah, they just need to find a way to frustrate them somehow. And Oregon and I think Oregon's going to be ready to go. Here's the thing about Dan Lanning, and over the course of his career, maybe where Mario Cristobal fell short, where they would lose to the Arizonas or the Arizona States or the Oregon States or teams like that, even though Dan Lanning did lose to Oregon State early in his tenure. But Dan Lanning usually takes care of business at teams that they are significantly better than. And I think that this is kind of another one of those matchups for Lanning and the Oregon Ducks right now. But like I said, Bret Bielema's got to find a way to come close to out coaching and try to find a way to frustrate them and try to, if they are able to make some stops, you got to take advantage of it. Make a special teams play, right? All of these things that you got to do that Bret Bielema knows all about, trying to Big Ten this game up, Big Ten West this game up kind of. But as we know, going to be a tall task against Oregon.
A team that certainly has stepped up on the defensive side the last few weeks is the Wisconsin Badgers, and that's arguably the game of the week, playing Penn State. What are your thoughts on that matchup?
Neutrality out the window. All right. Okay, let's get into this. I am so excited for this matchup. Madison is going to be absolutely rocking. It is homecoming. It is Halloween weekend. And if you know anything about Halloween in Madison, things can get a little bit freaky. And then you add that on top of that with the way the team has played the last 3 weeks. This is a rejuvenated fan base, and this is a rejuvenated football team. You mentioned it starts with the defense, and it shouldn't surprise anybody. Luke Tressel combine them. Mike Tressel, the defensive coordinator, and Luke Fickell, of course, the head coach, have a great defensive track record. They're playing well. I think the defensive line is stepping up and improving. Right, that was a unit that we were all kind of had some questions about. Elijah Hills is playing well up front. Linebackers are flowing to the football. We know that the secondary certainly was good, and now the offense has figured out who they are. They figured out their identity. They had 5 running backs that they were all seemed to be splitting carries with early in the season, and now I say, hey, Tyree Walker is one of the best running backs in the Big Ten in terms of rushing production. Now, okay, let's ride Tyree Walker. Let's get 100-yard game after 100-yard game. Let's run the football. And then let's set Braden Locke up with some play actions, with stuff across the middle, with some RPO stuff. He is mobile, and he can certainly run the football. This is going to be a test for the Penn State Nittany Lions. Okay, I looked at the rest of their schedule. Remember, they host Ohio State in a couple of weeks in the big noon game. This will probably be the toughest environment that they play the remainder of the season, right? So this is, I think, going to be a good test. And what did we see USC was able to do? They were able to run the football. Remember that big touchdown run from Quentin Joyner? Woody Marks was running the football fairly well. And then Lincoln Riley, for some reason, got away from it. I think Wisconsin is going to try to go at Penn State with the run game because you got to try to slow down these rush ends. The Wisconsin offensive line has been stepping up, and they've been doing better. I think Penn State certainly has a talent advantage, but I think Wisconsin can certainly have this be a game in the fourth quarter, and that's exactly where they needed to be. And then at that point, you just got to make plays. You got to find out where is Tyler Warren. The matchup of Hunter Wohler at safety, possibly against Tyler Warren, that's a pretty good matchup. Maybe that's defensively, one of the matchups that Penn State will face this season where someone maybe can actually somewhat guard Tyler Warren, right? So it's gonna be a battle. It's gonna be so much fun. We'll see if Penn State can do this. I picked Wisconsin to pull the upset in the beginning of the season, right? Surprise, surprise. But I picked the Badgers to pull this upset because Penn State might be looking a little bit ahead to Ohio State. And right now for Wisconsin, this is their Super Bowl. This is their game. It has all the makings of it. It is going to be an extremely difficult challenge. But if Luke Fickell is able to pull this off, that is a signature win. And now all of a sudden they'd be sitting there at 6-2 with just one Big Ten loss. This is why we love this thing, right? This is a roller coaster ride this whole season. So that should certainly be a good matchup. And as if you couldn't tell already, I can't wait for this thing to kick off on Big Ten Saturday night.
We've had a good history of bold predictions on the show, Ted. You recall my bold prediction for this season was Illinois defeating Michigan. So who knows? You don't know.
And go look it up. Preseason predictions. I had Indiana beating Nebraska.
No, really? Okay.
Just saying. Go look it up. Yeah.
I think we got to look up a lot of the old episodes. We might be making a good amount of money gambling. Should we try to do that? So what else is there, Ted?
So you got the big noon game certainly this week as well. The Nebraska Cornhuskers. I mean, they're going to Ohio State, and the Buckeyes are coming off of a bye. This is a tough spot for Nebraska because remember, when was the last time Ohio State played? Yeah, they lost to Oregon. I think they're going to look to prove, and Oregon's the number one team in the country. And Penn State is ranked ahead of them. I think they're going to be fairly motivated to come out and just take care of business in the first half. And look, you could break this matchup down and you could backwards and forwards. But if that Nebraska defense that we saw against Indiana, if you see that against Ohio State, you could see a similar result. I honestly believe that, right? We know about Ohio State's pass rush and just how good it is with Sawyer and Tui Moluau coming off the edge. They got really good interior defensive linemen as well. And then I look at how the receivers were able to have a really good day for Indiana. Boy, you put Emeka Buka, Carnell Tate, and Jeremiah freaking Smith out there. I don't know. This is a tough spot for Nebraska. Of course, you want to see them be competitive. Personally, I don't know if I see it. And then you've got Michigan and Michigan State for the Paul Bunyan Trophy. Michigan State is feeling very confident after that win over the Iowa Hawkeyes. Aiden Childs might be starting to turn a little bit of a corner, and Jonathan Smith is doing a good job with the Spartans team. Joe Rossi has that defense playing really good right now, and Michigan can't move the football at all. This one is in Ann Arbor. If Sparty is able to win, what is going to happen to this Michigan Wolverines fan base? Wow. And then you look at that, and then maybe we're looking towards next year. What is Michigan going to be next year, right? Because all of a sudden you sit at 4 losses. That's what you're looking forward to. Oh, crap. We don't have Loveland, Mullings, Edwards. We don't have Will Johnson. You don't have all of these guys, So the future of Michigan football does not look great. So they got to find a way to get this win over a Michigan State team that they haven't lost to since 2021. Remember that Kenneth Walker game prior to this season? That was the last Big Ten loss for the Wolverines. So should be a really fun weekend of football.
I'm actually going to be kind of curious to see that, should Michigan lose to Michigan State, I wonder if that roster revamp comes sooner rather than later. Like a lot of these players have NFL capabilities and abilities, and they may be forced almost to make some business decisions for the remainder of the year, especially if it looks like Michigan may not even make a bowl game. And I can't believe I said that.
there's been talk of say, hey, we've trotted out 3 quarterbacks. Sharon Moore said this week, we don't know who we're going to trot out at quarterback. Man, it's just that's constant change. Nobody can get in a rhythm at quarterback when there's constant change. I was listening to some Michigan shows this week, and they says, should we throw Jaden Davis out there, the 4-star true freshman? He's supposed to be our future. And I think that maybe comes after this week. Right. If they do indeed fall short, eventually you got to start looking ahead. Right. You got to start giving these guys times because there's this thing called the transfer portal. I'm not sure if you heard about it. If this thing continues to go south, aside from the players that are going to the NFL, you got to worry about, having guys be confident enough to come back or feel good enough about the program to come back next year. Right. And maybe getting some of those younger guys some playing time at that point. But they got to find a way to come up with something against this Michigan State team that's playing pretty well right now. I can't imagine. It would be so 2024 though, if the Spartans do find a way to win against the Wolverines.
As usual, the best in the world. Ted, let the folks know again what's going on your channel.
Yeah, going to be previewing some games this week: Nebraska, Ohio State, Illinois, Oregon, Penn State, and Wisconsin. That might be a little bit one-sided. I'm just going to throw that out there. I really like to be impartial, but this week, it's tough. This is Wisconsin Super Bowl. I think that's pretty fair to say out there, and Badger fans are certainly feeling really good. Gonna have my picks coming up on Friday, but as well, so watch out for that. But yeah, it should be a fantastic week. I'm looking forward to this. This is kind of maybe a weekend people didn't exactly circle on the schedule at the beginning of the year. But I think we could be in for a really competitive Saturday.
I just hope nobody gets hurt for the Illini. All right, Ted, we'll see you next week.
All right, sounds good.
And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Locked On Illini. On your way out, again, do me the big favor of just hitting that like button, subscribe button, hit that notification button. I'll be going live at some point this week. I've enjoyed doing that the last couple of weeks and getting to go back and forth with the community and the chat. We got a lot of basketball news coming up. Basketball season's just about a week and a half away. For football, of course, anytime Illinois plays the number 1 team in the country, it's going to be a big deal. So I'll be here covering it because that's what I do. Cover Illinois sports every single day. Until then, ILL love you guys.